Just delving into biotechnology, which is that not of this world. Since we can't travel into outer space further than the moon, they're trying to pretend as though we can travel in anywhere outside of the Milky Way galaxy, when it's simply not the case. Such gull at the behest of a civilian would have it be where the biotechnology would encompass that line of thinking as if we are, not interstellar, but outer galactic. We're not falling, we're flying in style. If you're an actuary, if you're a top-notch scientist, you can be an expert in a fields of fields, but you're not better than the King of Kings. Jesus Christ, this is blood that he told us to drink. And now, as gross as that sounds, it's just with a teaspoon of sugar would make the medicine go down. With what this means is that things that seem normal in 1,000 years would be looked at as just run-of-the-mills. That's where we're trying to go to. But first, we have to pinch pennies for getting down to brass tacks and understanding what is an open source to a scientific method, trying to find what number groups are in things that are Fourier transforms, Lorentz contractions, Maxwell's cages to describe fields, specifically in quantum electrodynamics. All this and more is coming up right now. And so within number groups, you can have yourself a complex plane. If you're looking at one line, it's almost as though you can hear my voice, but then the truck that's really loud is a second trajector overriding. That's where much of the problem is in waves when they're not lines, they're curves. And so if you can break down sound barriers, it's very easily what as the atmosphere entails, which was so fantastic because if there's really puffy clouds and there's a gap in it and you've got a streamline of a jet smoke going through, that's a really straight one. You then have yourself a complex plane in the dividend of the two. That would be a sweet rig. A sweet rig is like a tripod, but the more that you've got fanciful features on a tripod, the more that the bells and whistles you have are aiming it up to be something as though a high-tech aimer on a gun. The more that you can have a high-tech aimer on a gun is something as though you're dabbling into laser-guided symmetry. So the only thing better than a gun is like a laser gun that has a object that it propagates out from it, because lasers have light that propagates out from it, and they can be deflected just as easy because it's not an object moving really quickly. But the more that you have a fanciful aimer, that once again is very much just like a tripod that you get more fanciful with, because in Showtime business, the entertainment, camera riggings are an equipment that you can always pay more for, because you can always get more and more stable or more and more rotation that is gradual. Oh my gosh, a camera's rigs for professional ones cost so much, but at some point you're doing just enough to it in order to line it up into a high caliber sniper rifle, like a fantastically strong one. The propagation of a cannon, if it's going to be like a sniper rifle's accuracy, is something like the most high-powered sniper rifles. What they aim to do is essentially just be a giant cannon. So if you strap on an aimer that is going to be something of a professional's camera rig that has like all the bells and whistles on it, you're dividing up the high power firearm to be something as though a laser gun, because the aimer is so built up with an accuracy that that's the exact thing that laser guided symmetry does best, ergo laser gun. But then you're going to have a second, it's not a caveat, it's an advantage, where it's going to be like able to take shock absorbance, because that's what the stabilization of good rigs do. The more fanciful there are, you know, I saw one earlier, it goes around a camera, the outside of it like a picture frame, but it was so dialed in that it imitates like the dynamics of the body of those really expensive like sniper rifles that you see in video games. They always have like everything framed around the center force. So that's ostensibly not the second caveat, but the advantage that you're going to get when you're dealing with a rig put onto a firearm, but the rig being, you know, one of the best in Hollywood. So with that being said, there's things that are sloppy copies, and then there are things that are enhancements. And to get confused with, you know, like what's a decoy or what's a false alarm, those two things are disadvantages. The more that you can find that, the easier that it's going to be to like define in mathematics more and more easiness within computation. I don't care like needing to upgrade like a system, like if you're not really good at computer science, I don't care like if you have to be at step 1 and explain like the basic words of what an open source is over and over and over again ad nauseum, as long as it is making the mathematics, if you can dovetail mathematics, tying it into it. But the mathematics is increasing more and more and more, because that's where technology has come to a standstill, where the machines are only as so good as it can be, such as with cannons and high-powered lasers. At some point you just need a better aimer, and with the aim is that math is nothing short within computers. The algorithms, if they're smarter and smarter, then you might as well just keep upgrading the system with being really low-level dynamics of, you know, explaining what an open source is over and over again ad nauseum. As long as the system is improving, at least it is not a decoy or a false alarm. And I think that has a lot to be said with the complex plane, where if you can imitate like an ocean sea floor bed, a lot of it's been mapped out, and just the surface of the ocean, those ripples and all that stuff, you know, the butterfly effect, it has course with what the bottom of the ocean sea floor bed is directly involved through the normal force, which is a line directly down from the wave being pushed by the gravity of the moon, which is another normal force, opposite engagement, if you will. And so with that is kind of like how a physical wave versus like the cloud wispiness, how those are also like a wave, but they're more complex in nature. And then versus the sound wave, where it is ostensibly just then air pushing instead of water pushing, but nonetheless the Doppler effect is specifically of a classical wave, which is a parabola, as opposed to like a cloud where its wispiness is more arbitrary, or a wave of the ocean where its wave is more dense and arbitrary. Unless you could map out every wave at one instant in time throughout the entire ocean, then you could make a parabola out of that, because that's topology's theorem of how a mug and a torus are the same.